Let your kingdom come. It's a great prayer. You know, we're going to launch a new series next week. Happens to be just Super Bowl Sunday, some boring event. But we'll have far more excitement here at the Vineyard and next week. But building up to launching the series and throughout the series, we're building towards Easter. We're going to wait on all of our baptisms from now until Easter. We're going to wait on them to just be patient. We're going to do everybody on Easter. We've got some radical plans for Easter that we're going to build towards. We'll announce it as we get closer. But one of the goals is in this wall, 153, we've been talking about the big catch of fish that Peter had after the resurrection when the Lord kind of restored him back to himself. John 21 will be in that next week. But this 153 was how many fish that Peter caught in this miraculous catch. And we're using this wall over here, if you're curious, that we're putting first names on there of people that are far from God, that you love, care about, or know. And preferably people that are somewhat local, that could be invited, reached out to, and brought to Christ here. And doesn't mean we don't care and pray for people in other countries or states. Or if you were here Thursday night, we cried out to God for the nations. We cried out for Venezuela on Friday night. Did I say Thursday? Friday night we had prayer night. It was really cool. We've been doing it on Thursday nights and having minimal attendance. We threw our nets on the other side. We're just in this series of doing things a little different. So we moved it to Friday night. No big deal. Blew up with people. I mean, it was just like Thursday night, is anybody going to be here? Friday night, we had all the chairs in a circle. The worship team was in the middle. It was really, I wish we could do it every week. We got too many people. Some of you'd have to go home. So we don't want that. But the worship team was in the middle. I'm telling you, it was awesome. I felt like, because I was in the center circle, and then they concentric went out from there. I felt like I was part of the worship team. I mean, sometimes I stand up here and linger. I just kind of, what's he doing up here? I know they wonder. Brett's standing there thinking, what's the pastor doing up here? I'm just pretending I'm part of the worship team. And I'm playing an amazing guitar while I'm up here. You can't see it, but it's in faith. Anyway, we worshiped in a circle, and we had communion together. It was just a powerful night. But we cried out for Venezuela. We had a number of Venezuelans that were here, and just you could feel the compassion and faith rise in the room. That's what we're doing on this wall. These are people that you can find your way here after service, put a name on the wall, and while you're there, pray for several names that are on that wall. People you don't know, strangers. We just crying out to God as we through the week, as we're up here in the church. These are people we're crying out to God. This wall, Let's Fish, that'll be the name of our DVD series. It's 8 weeks. We've been calling out to people to sign up to be a host. Basically, open your home, and you gotta have some connection with some people that you can invite to come to your home. Friends, they come here to church. They don't come to church, doesn't matter. Family, friends, you open up your home, you serve a little snack, you turn on a DVD player. You show the DVD that we're going to do a series called Let's Fish. Those white symbols are symbols of groups of people that have said, I'll host a group. We're at 59 there, which is an amazing number. That's double what we've been doing, double. So we didn't just add, we are multiplying. And I don't think we're done yet. And so, we had a family visiting from Immokalee the other day, last week. They may be back, I don't know. We said, hey, it's a long drive. Start a group out there. We got groups starting we got a German group starting. We got Spanish groups. So we want to see this season of God just opening the doors for fish to come in. So we're going to be in John chapter 6 this morning. But before I get there, I want to show you a couple verses to kind of set the stage. I want you to think of this 153. Our new series is going to be called Table 153. There is room for everyone. No, or there's a place. Place or room. There's a place for everyone. Table 153. There's a place for everyone. That'll be our new series. We're building on this fish catch of 153. But that table you're going to see in the series is the Lord's table. It's communion. I'm not so certain. Don't hold me to this. But I'm pretty confident. I know next week we're taking communion. But I'm pretty certain we're going to take communion every week from now, not today. It would have fit today, but I didn't have it together. We did it Friday night. You should have been there. So we're gonna start communion next week, which we always do the first Sunday of the month. But let's be honest now. No shame. No. How many of you can tend to miss, maybe you miss that 1 month of communion, you're not here? How many miss communion on a regular basis? Let me see, just a little bit. There's no shame in it. It's like 30% of you, so hold up your hands. God, my God, how hard it is to be honest. It's not it's just reality. You miss church, and it happens we do it once a month. So if you miss communion, you miss that, you happen to miss that Sunday, you miss communion. That's all I'm saying. Wasn't a judgment. Whew, get over it. But you have far more odds of catching all of you doing communion every week. How many would agree with that? Okay, all right. Some of you still didn't raise your hands. That means you're here every week no matter what we do. I like that. Used to be that way. It never was years ago when we pastored. We never thought that every weekend we would be missing 30% of our church. Every week, 30%. And that's natural average. It's not Vineyard. I mean, if it was, I think there's something serious. I'm not happy with it. I'm not saying it's a good thing of our culture. People in our culture today think if they go to church once a month, they consider themselves on surveys, I am a regular attender. Not in my book. Let me just say that. Maybe in your book. But would you rather have people once a month than not at all? Absolutely. I'd rather have people once a year than not at all. Thus Easter, Christmas Eve outreaches, all about it. I welcome people that get a bump in life and haven't been going to church and they're like, maybe I should start. That's wisdom. So I'm not faulting anybody. But we're just, so anyway, I got off on all of that, and it's a tandem, and it has nothing to do with the message, and so let's move on. Okay, Lord's Supper. I want you to throw up Matthew 14. And this is, I'll skip the test, because I was giving a test. What's the only miracle other than the resurrection mentioned in all four Gospels? Who wants to take a shot real quick? Only miracle mentioned in all four Gospels. Hand. That doesn't make people, don't point it out. They're not smart enough to read that. They didn't even know if they missed communion once a month. What's the only miracle found in all four Gospels except the resurrection? No, that's only in John. That's once a week. What's the only miracle found in all four Gospels? Let me see a hand. What? Feeding the multitude, the 5,000, and then he also feeds the 4,000. You know what you win? The same prize the guy won in the last service. It's a Vineyard pin without the name Vineyard on it. It's got Bic. It's a Bic pin. There you go. It's from the Vineyard. We give out all we've got. That's all I got. I'd give you something better if I had something better. It's the only story, only miracle found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. In Matthew, he feeds 5,000 and then turns around and feeds 4,000. That's just men. There were women and children there too in both stories. In Matthew and Mark, they record both feeding of 5, feeding of 4. Luke and John only record feeding of the 5. It's the only miracle. Besides, you think God might be saying something as important in this story? And I'll never tap all of it today, but I want to give you the shape of communion, the Lord's table, the Eucharist, whatever you call it. It's going to be the shape of our table 153. It'll mean more. It may go all mystical, but it'll mean more as we go through the series. This table we're calling the table 153 is the place where we meet Jesus. It's the place where we commune with Jesus. It has 4 corners, and you'll see them as 4 verbs. I'm going to show you just a couple examples. There's like 10 of them I could show you. But this is Matthew 14 when he feeds the 5,000. It says he directed the people to sit down on grass. Mark says it was green grass. So you got to read parallel stories to get more nuances to it. And I love the different nuances that are brought to the story and the parallels. They're same story, just told from a different point of view. Taking, there's our first verb. Take. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes. Remember, Matthew says nowhere where they got them from. It's a mystery. John will tell us. He took the 5 loaves, the 2 fishes, looked up to heaven, gave thanks, or blessed. That's our second. In John, he's going to use the word for give thanks. He uses the word where we get the word Eucharist from. This giving of thanks. He gave thanks. Take, number 1. 2, gave thanks. 3, broke. the loaves. Broke them. And that's what they refer to eating as breaking bread. Let's break bread together. But it's symbolic of communion or the Lord's table or the Eucharist. He breaks the bread, and then number 4, then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. Matthew brings out that Jesus gives the bread to the people how? Through the disciples. John doesn't do that. He skips us. We'll talk about that. But all right, let's go to the Last Supper. This is where Jesus celebrates before he's crucified with his disciples, Matthew 26. While they were eating, Jesus took bread. There's our word. Number 1, first corner that he took. This is the shape, spiritually, not some weird literal thing. It's just getting you the feel of how the process works. He takes the bread. Number 2, he gave thanks or blessed it. Number 3, he breaks it. And number 4, he gives it to his disciples, saying, take, eat, this is my body. Now let's go to John. So John's going to tell the story. In fact, chapter 6 of the Gospel of John, it goes after the story of the feeding of the 5,000 into Jesus walking on the water. It's kind of like a sandwich between this long teaching and the rest of chapter 6 that deals with Jesus being the bread that comes from heaven. Everyone that's there with the feeding of the 5,000 had in the back of their minds Moses and the manna in the Old Testament. Jesus is going to teach on that, how the bread came from heaven and fed the people, that he's the bread that comes from heaven and feeds us for salvation. So, John chapter 6, look with me there, and I want you to just kind of see John's a little different than the other Gospels. I could have read Mark. It was similar to Matthew. I could have read Luke. It does. Take, blessed, break, give. It's all 4. Paul, the apostle, who wrote before any of the Gospels, and time-wise, the Gospels were being written. Paul wrote 1 Corinthians in chapter 11. He says, Jesus said to take, to bless, to break, and to give the bread. He uses the same 4 pillars, if you will, 4 corners, the shape. It's how we're formed spiritually. You'll see this morning that these are principles that apply to every area of our spiritual life. It's how we're formed spiritually, how we grow. So John is known to be different than the other Gospels anyway. So he tells it from his perspective. In chapter 6, verse 1, He anchors this in the Sea of Galilee, where he ends his gospel on the Sea of Galilee with Jesus and the feeding of Peter. He just feeds 7 there, but it's still a miracle breakfast. We're going to talk about it next week. He's at the Sea of Galilee. A great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs he had performed. Now, all the other Gospels bring out that he had compassion on the people, that they were as sheep who had no shepherd. Let me just say, if you're going to learn to fish and reach people for Jesus, you're going to learn with me, with all of us, because none of us arrived. Learn to see people as fish that need to be caught. Not caught in a bad way, but rescued. Jesus fishing for men is rescuing them. But when we stop seeing people as lost sheep and see them as political opponents, then it's easy to hate them. Come on. I got people that I watch on the news that I literally want to come through the TV and grab them around the throat. This is your pastor. My wife has to call. I have to, one of the things we're going to do in this series, I'll just get ahead of time. You can start trying to wean yourself now. We're going to make a faith goal, as we talk about this table 153, to not eat supper in front of the TV. Now, maybe you don't. We do. It's just 2 of us, and we tend to watch the news. It can't be healthy. Honey, watch something. So we're going to sit at the table, and we're going to try to restore in this series for you with families, much bigger challenge. Try to restore eating together at least a few times a week to make a commitment. We're going to lead up to that. Table 153 will be learning to have table time, which is a forgotten art of sitting down as a family, whether you're sitting down to a bowl of soup or filet mignon. It doesn't matter. It could be frijoli negros and arroz and pollo or frijoli rojos. It doesn't matter. It's learning to be a family or a couple. You know how we have so much better conversation sitting at the table. The other night she cooked me a big steak. And like we're going to sit at the table. I said, honey, this is too good of a meal to eat in front of the TV and watch certain news and get all worked up. Let's sit at the table. So we set the table, light a candle, just she and I. You think, well, that should be, you get out of the routine so easy. But we're going to talk about that. I'm getting ahead of myself, so stop it. So anyway, it's got nothing to do with this message. But the four corners, and I got so far off, I have no idea where I am or where I was even trying to go. Oh, that he saw the people like sheep that needed a shepherd with compassion. Next time you see a lost person acting lost, remind yourself, they're lost. Okay. It's when saved people act lost, that's when you can get bothered. But when lost people act lost and have political views that are lost in your mind, they're lost. You're not going to convert them into your political view and change their life. You're going to see them converted to Jesus in the kingdom view. Okay, enough of that. Verse 5. Jesus looked up, saw the great crowd coming towards him. He says to Philip, hey, buddy, why don't you go get some bread and feed these people? God loves to give assignments that are like, what? Me? Do what? He loves to give. That's what marriage does. This is just like marriage. Why did you marry him? What? They usually say that after the marriage, but you're like, what? Marry him? Her? He gives us assignments that are way beyond us. And children like this, I wanted one like that. That's where our world will be. Gene selection pool, pick the perfect child that, will behave and be gentle and kind. And that's called a saint. And you don't give birth to saints. You raise them to grow to become that. And they usually do after they're got out of the home. And so it's that journey of, God, what did you give me? I was amazed at people that, I want a child, I want a child. It's like, really? Have you been around them? Now that all of ours are gone, my wife every now and then look at, oh, that's so precious. We go, I go, what? You want another what? No. It's called grandchildren. Let them come over. Then you send them back home. Man, if marriage doesn't bring you to a place of what? Then kids will put you there. And if kids haven't put you there and marriage hasn't put you there, your job will put you there. So Jesus says, you think Jesus said, oh, be nice, Jesus. Give him a job he can do on his own without you so he can take the credit. Jesus says, go feed them, Philip. Philip says in verse 7, he's a good mathematician. He looks at the crowd. He says, 8 months. I don't know why he picked that, but he's trying to determine if everybody got one little piece and nobody math. He's probably a mathematical genius. I don't know. But he says 8 months' wages couldn't buy enough bread for us to give everybody just a little bite. Just a little bite. He's stuck in what he can do. He's stuck. And you get stuck in marriage with what you can do. You get stuck in life and your job and relationships. You get stuck because, it's kind of like, I love the honesty. He modeled it for us, the founder of the Vineyard, John Wimber. And he would often just say, I'm just a fat man trying to get to heaven. That was his motto. Actually, he would say, I'm a saxophone playing fat man trying to get to heaven. He would just be self-deprecating. But he said he had wanted this encounter with God one day. And God spoke to him and basically said, John, he'd been pastoring for a number of years. He said, John, I've seen your ministry. And he said the tone of his voice was, and I'm not impressed. I've seen what you can. He said, John, will you let me show you what I can do? Most of us in our lives have seen what we can do. We know what we can do. Our limits, our boundaries, we know what we can do. We define ourselves with what we can do. Christianity isn't go try harder. I watch so many people try to solve their problems. God honors diligence and sacrifice and hard work, but trying harder is not always the solution. Trusting more usually is. Jesus says, go feed these people. He's like, well, I can't. It could have 8 months' wage. Verse 8. Andrew decides he'll solve the problem. He looks around and he sees this boy or girl, it could be translated either way, who has a bag of lunch, has 5 barley loaves. That means they're poor. Barley was a poorer wheat, and they're biscuits. He has 5 little biscuits and 2 little sardines. Now, where that boy came from, John doesn't tell us. I love the mysteries of the Bible. You can't solve them, but you can have fun guessing. Where did he come from? Who did he come with? The word he uses could be a word. It's not a little bitty. He's probably preteen, could be a teen. He could be, let's call him a middle schooler. How old's the oldest middle? Like 12-year-old middle school? He's 12. 13, well, he stayed back a year. So he's 13 years old, middle schooler. So he's got his lunch. How did he get his lunch? Not from 7-Eleven. How did he get his lunch? His mama made him lunch. She's a good Jewish mom. You don't send your boy out or girl out without lunch. Now, some of you are too young to appreciate what it was to go to school with a bag lunch. How many of you remember going to school with a bag lunch? I had a Davy Crockett lunchbox. He was shooting a grizzly bear on there. I loved that lunchbox. I never looked in that lunchbox till lunch. Number one, I didn't like to be depressed because Mom might not have put some. I never saw her make it. She'd make the lunch, and I just trust her to go. But you know, what do you do when you open that lunchbox or you open that brown bag? First thing you do is what your buddy got. And you look over, and his sandwich always looks better than yours. Mom, why can't you? His mom cuts the crust off. I had a friend, his mother cut the crust off. It just looked like some delicacy. It was white bread back then. We never heard of whole wheat. It was Wonder Bread with a crust cut off. I'm like, wow, his mother cut the crust off. I want that. This crust is crappy. Who wants crusty sandwich? And his mother cut it at a diagonal. My mother cut it right straight across. To this day, if you let me cut my sandwich, I eat the crust, but I cut it at I don't like it cut in half. I like it cut at a diagonal. Is that OCD? Sure it is. You know it because you're worse than me. You're like my friend, he'd eat his hamburger. I'd watch him. He ate it in circles. Somebody does it too. They just said, yep. It's like, that's normal. That's a disorder. It's like people that eat corn. You know personalities. You can literally do a personality test by how you eat corn. There's the straight eaters. They go right across. There's not a kernel missed in that row. It's the same amount of rows that every teeth goes by. It's like a typewriter. Cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha, ding! Cha-cha-cha. Others eat it in a circle. They go round and round and round and round, and you work your way down. Then there's the random eaters. They have no rules. They just eat in the middle, they eat in the end, they eat upside, and there's kernels left all over it. And those of you that love to eat in rows, you look at that and go, oh my God, look how many kernels you wasted. It might be because they're missing teeth, but they go, look at the kernels you're missing. It's harder when you got a tooth missing. You could do a whole personality study on all the row cutters. All right, how many are row cutters? Come on, let me see. Eat your corn in a row. You're weird people, okay. How many circle the corn? Let me see the random people. Come on, yeah, come on. Just eat it, go free. Be free. Take a bite out of the middle. I couldn't do that. I had to start to the left and go to the right. We're all neurotic. Just other people look weirder because you're used to your own neuroticness and you've made room for it in your life and it's just a normal. So this kid's mom sent him, he's just a good mama. Listen, John's the only one that brings out where the 5 loaves and 2 fishes come from. You say, what difference does it make? The difference is it got to rock this kid's world. I don't see Andrew snapping up the bag saying, look, Jesus, I got some food. And the boy, oh, my food. No, this boy chose from his heart to say, I want Jesus to have my lunch. He didn't say, I'll give Jesus a biscuit and I'll share my lunch with Jesus. He handed everything he had. Everything he had. I love what it says here. It says, Jesus says in verse 9, here's a boy with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But again, he's staring at what we have. He says, but how will this go among so many? What good is this? All I got is a little strength, a little wisdom, a little talent, a little gift. Well, what is this? With the need, we stare at the need of life and how lacking of love you have. And you look at the need and you look at your lack, and it cripples us. It condemns us. It limits us. It locks us into all we can see possible is what we can do. And anybody can, that's an atheist life. Atheists live that way. We're believers. This little boy said, it's not much, but if I get it to Jesus, maybe something's going to happen. Jesus tells them, verse 10, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass. He doesn't bring out that it was green, but Mark does, chapter 6 of Mark. And can you think of a story that, they're like sheep with no shepherd? It says that in Mark. And then Mark brings out that they had green grass to sit in. And Jesus is about to feed them. Can anybody say Psalm 23? He makes me to lie down. The shepherd makes me. This is the whole picture here. Is the shepherd caring for the needs of his sheep. Have them sit. When you say to someone, sit down, what are you saying? You say, come on, sit down at the table. Join us. But what else are you saying? There's food coming. I love this story. His name was George Mueller. You could Google him. He had an orphanage back in the 1800s that he ran by faith. He had a deal from God. And I'm saying everybody does it this way. But he said, Lord, I will never ask. And now, this can be pride for some of us. But for him, it was God led him. He said, God told him never to ask a penny of anybody to run his orphanage. He never did. He asked God. He had, I forget how many kids. It was a couple dozen kids in his orphanage. They had run completely out of food. No food. No credit cards back then. No run to the Walmart and family store. Let's get a bun. No. He told the children, come on and bring the children and have them sit at the table. Now talk about, what does it say when you say come to the table? You've raised the level of expectation. It's like us inviting people to come to the cross to get prayer for healing. We just said we're expecting God to do something here. We've upped the ante. When he says to the disciples, in the other gospel stories, all the disciples are telling him is, get rid of the people. Send them home. Let them go get their own food. We've got nothing. We don't even have anything to eat. They literally say, Jesus, send the people away. The needs are too much for us. Send them away. In this story, he goes and gets on his knees to God and says, God, you've got to feed your children. You said, give us this day our daily bread. Not long after the prayer, knock at the door. A milk truck filled with eggs, cheese, and milk ran out of gas in front of the orphanage. And it's going to spoil. And he says, you got any use for these eggs and milk and cheese? And he said, we sure do. We're going to serve them right now. Bring them in. He delivered an entire milk truck. George Mueller. Does that make you think, I'm not sure I'm even a Christian? When you start whining to God. This story is a story about how God provides, like the 153. He doesn't just give us a stingy bit. God's not like, just he's a bountiful, abundant Father. So he says, make the people sit down. It takes obedience out of these disciples because all they know is they got a little bag of this boy's lunch. And now they're sitting down. They're not going home. They're raising expectation. And then he says this. Verse 11. Jesus then took. There's our word. Remember I said there were 4 corners of the table. Take, bless, break, give. He took. The word take here is not snatch. It has the idea of he accepted, he received. Can you imagine? What if Jesus, come on. Some people's view of the Father is like this. You offer him something, and maybe you had a dad like this. I'm sad for you if you did. But can you imagine that little boy gave all he had to Jesus? Jesus looked in the bag and said, that's it? You brought me this? And he throws the bag back at the kid like, come on, give me something worth giving me. Who's got some abundance here? Who's got something worth giving? Can you imagine what that would have done to that little boy's heart? That would have crushed him. That would have ruined his heart. Because what the story doesn't tell us is who the boy is or what he became. This boy is the hero of the story that never gets named. But who, in 30 years, when he's in his 40s, or 20 years in his 30s, what church is he leading? What dramatic effect is he having on planet Earth? Why? Because he learned this simple principle that if I can get, have you ever heard the saying, little is much if God is in it? You heard that? This means yes, this is no. It's dead stares, I'm gone. Okay, you got me on lunch, and I'm all about lunch, and I can't get OCD. I'm thinking I'm eating the corn. I'm going back across the corn. I got it stuck. I'm telling you, one of the first miracles I ever witnessed in my life, my brother choked eating corn, and I'm like 4 years old, and he coughed up, and a kernel of corn came out of his nose. I'm 4. I'm like, I thought it was a miracle. I still don't understand how that can happen, but it came out, a kernel of corn. The bad part is he re-ate it. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. He probably did. He was my brother. I mean, what can I say? I never said he was smart. So stay with me. Back here. Get off the corn. Get back here. Now you made me forget where am I. What is it? What is it? What he became. We don't know. So let's move on. All right. You thought I had some secret knowledge. I don't know. But just dream about it. Dream about what that faith did in his heart to see God feed 5,000 plus with women and children added. You're 8,000 people out of his bag of lunch. When you see what God can do with a little bit, you think, wow, he's a big God. You don't think, wow, my lunch was a big lunch. Little as much. That's where I was going. Little as much if God, someone just caught back with me. You're catching up. The rest will later. Little as much if God is in it. The question isn't, that's true, but the question is, how do you get God in it? How do you get your little and get God? You bring what you have by faith, sacrificially, and you give it into his hands. What's in your hands that's little, weak, flawed, and insignificant becomes powerful, limitless, filled with the wonder of what his hands can do with what we put in it. When in the word take, Jesus took the load, he welcomed it, he received it. When we give Jesus our lives, he takes our weakness, brokenness, failures, sins. He receives, he welcomes. This is what the communion table is all. It's a welcoming. It's a bring what we have to Jesus. Not that he needs it. The miracle didn't require the boy's lunch. But what effect it had on the boy and the other. The same as when he turned the water into wine. It didn't require water. He wanted it to be water so that they participated by being obedient to do what he told them to do. And I'm telling you, if you could just get that secret, what God tells me to do, if I will do it and put it into his hands, I can't limit what he can do with that. If you're struggling in different areas, I would question, is that an area of your life that is in the hands of the Lord? Or is it in your hands, by your grip, by your strength, by your force? Here's what we tend to do. We bring the little to Jesus and we give him our lunch, but then there's this sticky cord that's just attached and it comes back. Oh, look, the lunch is back. Okay. I gave it to Jesus. Just like the pastor said. I made a commitment on Sunday. I went to the cross. I stood. I said, yes, Jesus. I gave him my lunch. I know I did. I took it back with me when I left, but it was my lunch. No, when you give it to him, now whose is it? There's a transfer of ownership. What is it in your life you still own? Your job? Your ability to produce income? Your relationship? Your parenting abilities? What you do in the church? Where have you limited yourself to what you can do? and not said, Lord, here am I. Take what I have, and I put it in your hands. Jesus will take it. Now it's his. And you got to remind him, that's your lunch. I'm not taking it. It's your lunch. I got no lunch. I gave it to you. I put my tithe in the offering, just reminding you, Lord, what I don't have now. Because here's the lie that keeps people from giving Jesus their lunch. That when you give Jesus what you have less. And that's the way the world works. It's called a poverty mentality. If somebody gets a piece of pie, there's less pie for you. If you give your last piece of pie to Jesus, you got no more pie. See, that's the myth or the lie that the enemy keeps us locked in of why we don't put things in Jesus' hands. I don't put them in his hands because you got no lunch. Where's your lunch? It's in his hands. What are you going to eat? I don't know. It's in his hands. I'm going to have to trust him. I'm going to look to him. I'm going to have to believe in him. I'm going to watch him. I don't know how he's going to do it. But I got to trust that when I give Jesus something, including my money, I don't have less money. Some of you just have not grasped that. You don't give God your 10%. And maybe you give God 2%, 3%, whatever. Or you tip him. Or whatever's left in the wallet at the end of the week, you give to God. And there's no sense that it's in God's hands doing it that way. When you give God your 10%, now you can say, God, it's in your hands, all that I have. What I have with 90% left over with your blessing will go so much further. That lunch in his hands is about to feed 7,000 people. Kept in his hands, how many is it going to feed? Maybe 2, maybe just him. Not many. Take and give it to him. He'll receive it. Now it's in his hands. Have him sit down. Now he does the second step. We're not going to be able to elaborate on this, but he gives thanks. The word here is where we get our word Eucharist from. Eucharist is just a word that means giving of thanks. But it's far more now in the church. It represents communion. Some cultures call it communion, the Lord's table, the Lord's Supper, Eucharist. But this is where John connects with this language of giving of thanks. This is Jesus transforming the loaves and fishes into something it wasn't. He's injecting, he's saying, Father, I'm thanking you for this, but I'm also blessing this. And when he puts his blessing on something, he's beginning the process of changing it. It's still going to be loaves and fishes, but now it's loaves and fishes that Jesus infused with his presence, his blessing, his life. It's still bread and fish, but can you imagine how that tasted when he gave it out? Come on. I mean, we fasted all of one day for Friday night before prayer. You'd have thought it had been 3 weeks since I'd eaten. I mean, I was gnawing on my wife's arm on the way to church. And irritable, I mean, my staff were like, hey, what's going on, Jamie? Hey, we're going to worship tonight. Anybody want to? No. I mean, we were all grumpy. I mean, we fasted. One of my staff's sons, your handsome Nino, he's on the worship team. He actually fasted. He's 14. So we're serving communion. We broke the bread. Well, my wife and I are so hungry, we didn't even think about it. We're over there. We break the bread, and everybody's going around breaking off a piece of bread. They're all waiting on us because we're going to take the cup around and say, this is his blood shed for you, and they're going to dip the bread in it. Well, we're so hungry, we tear off a piece, and we eat it right there. And I look up, and everybody's standing there holding their bread. I'm like, I got to get another piece. So I tore off. I'm so hungry. I'm telling you, that bread tasted better than any bread. I've also gone like 3 weeks with no carbs. I'm off of it now, but I made it 3 weeks. So that bread set me off. No, it didn't. It just choice. But it was. I'm telling you, something was in that bread. But anyway, I get over to our bass player, teenager. I offer him the bread. I'm telling you, he palms it like a basketball and rips a piece off. He could have made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich out of it. I mean, he took half the loaf. I'm like, dude, are you going to make a sandwich? Or he goes, And then he dips it in the cup, and I said, dude, that's good. He starts shaking it. He's got somebody that sucked up the whole cup. Now Kelly's ready to move on to the next song, and she's like, come on, start playing. He's like, I got to eat the bread. And he's not a fast eater, so she's enjoying Jesus. You're going to get on a kid for enjoying Jesus? I wanted more Jesus. Is that wrong? No. We had to go get more bread, but it's not wrong. There was a point to that too. Blessed it. It's blessed bread. That was it. Okay. Take it, bless it. But look what John doesn't say. I don't know why. I'm going to just tell you straight up. It says, John, he took the bread, he blessed the bread, and then he distributed or he gave. So that he did 3 out of the 4. He's the only gospel guy that broke the bread out. It's a term that's used in common vernacular among believers, early church. Let's break bread together, meant to have communion. Paul uses it. The book of Acts uses it. John's not stupid. He chooses not to use that he broke the bread. I have different theories. The only one I can kind of lean into somewhat, it's not he's just forgot. John never tells in his gospel about the transfiguration. He doesn't tell the virgin birth of Jesus in the gospel. He starts at the beginning of creation. John's different. He's intentionally different. He's the only gospel writer in chapter 19, when Christ is crucified, that he brings a prophecy out that none of his bones were broken. Now, I don't know if that ties in with him saying Jesus broke the bread. I don't know. I don't know why John left that out, because it's part of the church tradition, the shape of communion. But he leaves it out, and maybe there's something God will show you in that. It's obviously that Jesus breaks the bread because that's how he multiplies it. If he doesn't break something, it doesn't get multiplied. If he doesn't break you, you stay you. If he doesn't break what you give him, it just stays you. He breaks things in order to multiply them. He doesn't break them because he's mad at us. He breaks us to free us. That pride, that selfishness, that hoarding, that prejudiceness, that whatever the bondage is in your life. When he breaks the bread, it exposes all of us inside. He wants us to be real with him. There's a whole message on brokenness. I'm just saying, when you give it to him, he's going to take it. He's going to bless it. He's going to break it. But then John skips the disciples and goes right to saying Jesus distributed the bread. It says, verse 11, Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, distributed, which is giving. But in all the other Gospels, he gives it to the disciples, who gives it to the people. To those who were seated, as much as they wanted, he did the same with the fish. Why does he leave the disciples out? Again, it doesn't tell us, but I think the implication is, it's like it doesn't matter who the pastor is. It doesn't matter who the messenger is. It doesn't matter who the worship leader is. It doesn't matter who is the vehicle that God's using to give out what he's giving out. It's about him. So never focus on the vessel that he uses. Because every time we preach, all we do is go before God with what we've sought him after and prepared and studied. Said, Lord, take this. And then bless it. Infuse it with your life, your blessing, your presence. And then break it so it's not Jamie or Kim or Charles. Break it. Break it, Lord. Don't let it just be what we have. Let it be what you want to make it be, and then give it. He'll often now he gives it to us to give away. Can you imagine if our worship team came up to worship like that? And they do. Instead of just showing up, but they showed up and they've already said, God, take what I have. And I know Charles did that this morning. He gave in worship what he has, and with his weaknesses and deficiencies. He says, take what I have. And Jesus receives it. But he blessed it. So it's beyond the noise. And then he breaks it. So it's not about us. It's about him. It's the sweetness of him. And he gives it away. That's how the kingdom works. In any other area, marriage, child raising, finances, struggles with addictions, whatever the area of life, it's these corners of the table with Christ as the host. That if you don't get it to Jesus, you're done. It's in your hands. If you get it to Jesus, you got to trust Jesus to bless it. You got to trust Jesus to fill it with who he is. And then you got to know he's going to break it. Oh, it's not fun being broken, but then giving it away. And I love John brings this out. None of the other gospel writers bring it out. But at the end, they all bring out that they gathered fragments and they tell them how many was left over baskets. But this, they gather it because Jesus tells them to. The other gospels, they don't record this. In verse 12, when they all had enough to eat, which is a whole message in itself, they were satisfied. They wanted more. You want more? Come on, second helping. Who wants more? I mean, they didn't get to tote it with them. They just kept, it's a principle of Jesus is not going to run out. Jesus has no end. Because someone else got something doesn't mean you get less. Jesus doesn't have a reservoir that you can drain. He's the God who multiplies, the God who provides. And it's not just, but it's an abundance. Jesus says to him in verse 12, when they'd all eaten enough and been satisfied, gather the pieces that are left and let nothing be wasted. The word wasted means perish. Again, there's a lesson here of stewardship of things. Don't be wasteful. That's a practical lesson. But a deeper lesson is the same thing that happened with the nets in John 21, where it says the nets didn't break and none of the fish were lost. Jesus later in this chapter is going to say, everyone that the Father's given me, I will not lose them. Don't let the nets have holes in them. He said, gather up what I've provided. Think of them as people. Gather the remnants. Don't let anything be wasted. And this begins to reveal Jesus to these people. And it's a powerful, powerful kingdom lesson. I've not exhausted it, and I hope you'll take some time and just kind of marinate in this week. Read Mark's story or Luke's story or Matthew's story, the same incident, and see how can it relate in my life? Or what are the 5,000 people that need to be fed? Maybe it's your family and the needs of your family. Maybe it's a relationship, and you just feel devoid of being able to give what you don't have enough to give. You don't stop there. You get it in his hands. So I'm going to invite the worship team to come up. I'm just thinking, before we stand, I just think there may be somebody here. Let's just take a moment. Just take a moment and pray with me before we sing this last song. I think there may be somebody here today that you need to give your life into his hands. You've never, and not about giving him your talents or your time or your money or your struggle. It's about your life. Jesus will never look at your life like the boys' loaves and fishes and say, that's it. He wants all of you. And if you're here today and you've not given Jesus your life, I want to invite you to right now to put it in his hands. It's been in your hands up to this point, and you've seen what you can do, and it's not really pretty. God wants to do something wonderful with your life. But would you put it in his hands this morning? Say, how do I do that, Jamie? It's a simple prayer. Just bow your heads and just say, Lord Jesus, I give you my life. All that I am. I lay it in your hands. I'm tired of running my own life. You take charge. You be Lord. Just ask him to take charge. Come be Lord of my life. Forgive my sins, Lord. See, he's the bread. He's the bread that came from heaven that was blessed and broken and given to us for salvation. Let him come into your life right now. Just invite him to come in. Lord, bless that one with courage this morning. Lord, just say thank you to him right now. If you invited him in your life, just say thank you. He heard you. He answered you. Before we all stand to worship, I just felt impressed that there's someone here that you need to take that stand this morning to say, I've let Jesus be Lord of my life this morning. I asked Jesus to be Lord of my life. I said yes to Jesus as my Lord. That's what we like to say. I said yes to Jesus as my Lord. Who needs to stand and do that this morning? We want to ring a bell. We're not trying to embarrass anybody. We want to celebrate. That's why we got those names on the wall up there. Your name might be up there. People may be praying. I don't know. Whether it's up there or not, it's on the Lord's heart. If you need to stand this morning, stand right where you are. I say yes to Jesus as my Lord. Anybody need to make that stand this morning? Be bold. I know it's scary in front of everybody, but we're not meaning it to be intimidating. We want to celebrate. But it's important for you to go public with your faith. Anybody that needs to take that stand? Well, the pastor has told way too many stupid stories and gone a little long, but that's okay. You came to church in the rain. Just pretend it's pouring out there right now, and you want to take a few more minutes before you run out and get corn. So let's stand up together. Come on up, honey. We want to worship together. And I want you to just visualize bringing yourself to Jesus, whatever you got, your bag lunch, what is it that you need to get in His hands this morning? What is it that you need to get in His hands? Bring it to Him. Come, Jesus. Come, Jesus. Lord, speak. Speak, Lord. Come, Lord.
I know you're satisfied. I am empty, but I know your love is not run dry. So I wait for you. So I wait for you. I'm falling on my knees, offering all of me. Jesus, you're all this art is living for. Sing out broken. Broken, I run to you for your arms open wide. I am weary, but I know your touch restores my life. So I wait for you. So I wait for, sing, so I wait for you. So I wait for you. I'm falling on my knees, offering all of me. Jesus, you're all this art is living for.
Yes, Jesus, you're all this heart is living for. Right, church? We get to live for Him. What a message. Take it home, marinate the four corners of the table. Take, bless, broken, giving. Let God do that in your life this week. I'm going to invite those to the cross to pray, our prayer team. And if you're here, please don't leave without being touched by the Lord. If you need somebody to agree with you in faith, the Lord is here. His presence here. He is touching people. As Pastor Jamie mentioned about the lady that got healed. I don't know if you mentioned in this service, but got healed on Friday night when we had our worship and prayer. She came here with a incredible sciatic pain that she could barely walk. And she just got up and said, I'm healed. He touched me. Jesus touched me. And that's what He does. So don't leave here. Let somebody pray for you. If you've got an emotional heartache, something you're going through, you need somebody to agree with you, come to the cross. We want to believe and pray with you. So let's ask the Lord to bless the remainder of your week. And if you're a first-time visitor, a guest, we'd love to meet you. My husband and I will be here in the front. We have a gift for you. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, we thank you. We thank you for your words of truth. Lord, we take them and we eat them because they are life. They are the bread of life. We thank you for being broken for us, Father, for giving to us, Lord, for blessing our lives. Lord, we run to you. Let us run to you this week and know that you take what we give you and you multiply it, you increase it. Father, let us be a people of faith. Thank you for your love. Bless each one, Lord, as they go back with their families and their jobs and their children. Pour out your blessing. In Jesus' precious name, and all God's children said, amen.